Hi friends, this is Mukesh Gupta here and you're watching Pushing Beyond the Obvious. We've been talking a lot about what makes someone a leader worth following. And one of the things that is super important for us to understand if we really want to become a leader worth following is to understand the difference between logic and psychological thinking. And we need to understand when to use what, right? There are times when you need to use logical thinking, which is how economists think, in a way, if I have to make it an example, and when to use psychological thinking, which is how marketers and creative people think. And when we use the right tools for the right job, that's when we become leader worth following. I've been reading this book written by Rory Sutherland. The book's title is called The Alchemy. And in the first page of the book, he lists down his rules of alchemy. Alchemy being the ability to create magic out of nothing, right? Which is the journey from the logic part of your brain and how you solve problems to the psychologic part of your brain, which then creates its own set of solutions and ideas. So here is Rory's rules of alchemy. Rule number 1, the opposite of a good idea can also be a good idea. We've seen this play out everywhere. In the same product category, you find a product which is extremely successful at the lower price, competing on price and utility. And at the same time, in the same product category, you also have an ultra luxury premium product also succeeding based on the premium appeal that they have. So two opposing ideas, both successful, both good ideas. And this is something that we can see across the board. Not all opposing ideas are great, but there can be opposing ideas which can be good as well. Rule number 2, don't design for average. Now, one of the things that I've always shared when I'm helping people run design thinking workshops or product development workshops is that it is much more interesting to design for extreme users or extremes and then kind of, if needed, dumb it down rather than create for the average and then try to make it more interesting. The other way around is much more easier and much more fun, and a lot more creative ideas come up when you're trying to design for the extremes. So keep in mind, don't design for the average, design for either one end of the spectrum or the other end of the spectrum. And then if needed, you can actually move towards the average. In most cases, you don't even need to. And that's what makes your idea extremely creative and innovative. Rule number 3, it doesn't pay to be logical if everyone else is being logical. So if your competition is thinking logically and you think logically, then your ideas and your competitors' ideas are going to be very similar. So you can't stand out. And today we live in a world where it is super important for us to stand out. If nothing else, just standing out of the crowd is the entry ticket for you to be able to do anything at all beyond that. And if you really want to stand out, then you need to do things that your competitors are not doing. And which is what he says, that if all your competitors are thinking logically, if they're thinking like economists, if they're thinking like accountants, then stop thinking like that. Think creatively. Think like a designer. Think like an artist. Think like a marketer. Think like a psychologist. Think like a behavioral economist. Create choice architecture. Be interesting. So, the nature of our attention affects the nature of our experience. So I'll just give you a very simple example of this. For the last 103 days, I've been trying to post one single picture on my Instagram account of something that I find beautiful that is around me. And I've been doing this every single day in the last 7 days, I've missed 4 days. So which means that in the 107 days that have passed, I've published at least one picture of something that I found interesting on my Instagram channel. Now, what has that done is now I can see beauty in everything that is around me. Beauty in mundane things, beauty in day-to-day things, beauty in nature, beauty in a storefront, beauty in a flower, beauty in the way the road signs are laid out. I see beauty everywhere. So that's what Rory means when he says the nature of our attention affects the nature of our experience. Rule number 5. A flower is simply a weed with an advertising budget. I like the analogy a lot. The core purpose of a flower for a plant is to propagate itself. It's selling itself to the bees so that the bees can come, take the pollen and spread the seeds so that the plant and the species itself can continue to grow. Not very different from creating an ad budget for a product that you're trying to sell. Right? So creative thinking at its best, in my opinion. Rule number 6. The problem with logic is that it kills off magic. I think there is a little bit of a, how do I put it, I agree to parts of it and I don't agree to parts of it. You can still create magic by being logical, by taking logic to an extreme. But I tend to agree with Rory that it's much easier to create a magical idea, to create a creative idea, if you are using psychology rather than logical thinking, psychological thinking rather than logical thinking. So I tend to agree with him there. So most of the creative ideas, most of the really creative ideas, they don't come from thinking about a problem logically. They come when you look at the same problem tangentially, from a different point of view, from a lens that is not necessarily logical in nature. So rule number 7. A good guess which stands up to observation is still science. So is a lucky accident. I don't know much about accidents, but I think a good guess is definitely science as well, based on observation. Because a lot of times in the past, we have seen that ancient generational wisdom is all about observation, and even science is all about observation. Most of the groundbreaking inventions that have happened in science have been total accidents. Just the scientists being curious about something that was not supposed to happen. So it all starts from an observation. And science itself is based on the fact that anything and everything that science says, it is true until proven wrong. That's the foundation of science. So I totally agree with him about observation that stands as a science. Not so sure about a lucky accident though. Rule number 8. Test counterintuitive things only because no one else will. Again, this kind of points to his rule number 6, which is about logic killing off magic. A lot of times we end up not pursuing silly things or pursuing extreme creative things simply because they don't sound like they would work. But what Rory suggests is that there's no harm in trying them out. There's no harm in exploring how things work. And that's also the basis of scientific experiments, right? Scientific theory, which is you create a hypothesis, you create an experiment based on the hypothesis, and then you test whether the hypothesis is true or false. And that's what he says. Even though you come up with counterintuitive things, if you do, you're lucky. If you do, and you're good if you do, test them out. Don't just ignore counterintuitive things or silly things. Test them rigorously. Rule number 9. Solving problems using rationality is like playing golf with only one club. I completely agree with this. There are many tools in our tool set which we can use to solve any given problem. You can use logic, you can use behavioral science, you can use how designers think is a very different way to solve the same problem vis-a-vis how an engineer thinks to solve the same problem vis-a-vis how an economist thinks to how they would approach the same problem vis-a-vis how a behavioral scientist will think about approaching the same problem. So there are many, many ways to solve the same problem. So let's not just limit ourselves to logical thinking. Number 10, dare to be trivial. A lot of times, the simplest answer and the simplest ideas are the best ideas. And no one has the guts in the current environment to suggest something silly or trivial, which is questioning the foundational assumptions that we are making. And once we are able to make that, that's when real breakthroughs can happen. So rule number 11. If there were a logical answer, we would have already found it. Everyone is thinking logically, and if for a given problem, if there were an answer, interesting answer that could have been found using logical thinking, someone would have already found it. And there's nothing more that you can do beyond that, if that's the be all and end all of how you solve problems or how you approach creative challenges. So thankfully, that's not the case. Thankfully, there are many, many ways that you can solve any given problem. There are many, many ways in terms of how you can address a simple or a complex challenge. So, yeah, those were the 11 rules of alchemy that Rory talks about in his book, titled the same, Alchemy. The journey, I think it's the journey from logic to psychologic. What do you think? Do let me know in the comments. Until we see next time, this is Mukesh.